I guess I want to start by saying that we're really lucky tonight in Central Florida. Earlier this evening, an FDLE agent was ambushed and was almost killed. He was shot in the face. And now several hours later, here we are out at this location where a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old decided to take on deputies tonight. This all begins at around 5 o'clock tonight when one of our juvenile homes, which is a complete failure and disgrace to the juvenile justice system in the state of Florida, a place called FUMPSH, a 12-year-old who is a severe diabetic, who has to have insulin every 4 hours, runs away. And he runs away with a 14-year-old. That 14-year-old that he runs away with, you may remember, over the last year or so, stole a bunch of puppies, gets put into a halfway house in Flagler County, burns the home down. So what do? They send her to Volusia County because the juvenile justice system works so well here in the state of Florida. So now they're reported missing. So the deputies in the Deltona area go out looking for this 12-year-old and this 14-year-old because the 12-year-old is insulin dependent, and the 12-year-old, if he doesn't get his medication within 4 hours, it's going to be a critical medical emergency. So every time the deputies encounter these two little desperados, they run from us. So at around 7:30, 8 o'clock tonight, deputies are out on the bike trail behind this home when a passerby flags them down and says, I happen to hear a bunch of breaking glass at a home. So the deputies walk up to the home, they discover that there's forced entry to the home. And the amazing thing is they don't do what I would have done. I would have walked in because I have an eyewitness telling me two juveniles just forced their way into the home. They take a step back and contact the homeowner and say, should anybody have access to your home? As resources are pouring in to surround the property, the homeowner says, nobody should be home, but I have 3 firearms in the house. An AK-47, a pump shotgun, and a handgun, and 200 rounds of ammunition. So as deputies are surrounding the home and try to establish a rapport, they are met with gunfire. And they're not met with gunfire once, they're not met with gunfire twice, they're met with gunfire multiple times. At 8:28, one of my sergeants, who was the first to arrive, Sergeant Donnie Maxwell, takes fire multiple times, never returns fire. At 8:31, one of our units reports they're being fired at by the 12 and the 14-year-old. At 8:33, another call comes out from another group of deputies surrounding the home saying that shots were fired. At 8:40, the 14-year-old emerges from the property and threatens to kill Sergeant Maxwell. At 8:54, the juvenile male armed with an AK-47 opens fire on deputies. Eventually, after all this goes on and we try to de-escalate, we throw a cell phone into the house to try to talk to them, the 14-year-old comes out of the garage with a pump shotgun, levels it at deputies, and despite warnings to drop it, she walks back into the garage. She comes back a second time, and that's when deputies open fire after taking multiple rounds. After they wound her, they automatically transition to try to save her life. Apply tourniquets, get first aid in here. They confront the 12-year-old who is still armed with the AK-47 in the garage. After about 30 seconds, he decides to drop the firearm. I don't know what to say. Where have we gone wrong that 12-year-old and 14-year-old think it's okay to take on law enforcement? What the hell is the Department of Juvenile Justice doing sending these kids to places that can't handle them? We talk about juvenile justice reform. Deputies did everything they could tonight to de-escalate, and they almost lost their lives to a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. If it wasn't for their training and their supervision, like I said earlier, I would have walked right into that house. Hey, 2 teenagers, 2 kids broke into a home, I'm going to go in and arrest them. Somebody would have ended up dead. So I don't know what more to say. You know, we'll release the body camera footage tomorrow. The information that I gave you tonight is preliminary. It's based on radio transmissions, it's based on computer dispatch calls, and it's based on the original supervisors that showed up at the scene. I don't know where we get the men and women that respond to these incidents to do what they do, and do it with bravery, do it with courage, and do it with trying to protect the sanctity of the human life. but they took rounds, multiple rounds, before they were left with no other choice but to return fire. And again, a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. So for all the faith groups out there who want to tell me about civil citations and we don't have violent juveniles, keep something in mind. This Fumps home, several weeks ago, one of their students beat to death one of the counselors. We've been out to this location 289 times in 2020 for various incidents. And the Department of Juvenile Justice consistently is sending kids that need to be in secure facility into our communities. And tonight, thankfully, I have deputies who are going home to their families because they knew what to do, they were well trained, and they were well supervised. Can you imagine the firepower in that home in the hands of 12 and 14-year-olds that want to threaten, if they open fire on us and then come out and defy us to shoot them because they're going to kill deputies? This is something I've never seen in 35 years of policing, and I'm sad to say, thank God my career is starting to come to an end, because I don't know what the future of law enforcement looks like in this country. They want to defund us, they want to sanction us and take qualified immunity away, they want to make us the bad guy, and yet you have 12 and 14-year-old thugs that want to shoot it out. And you haven't seen this crime scene yet. The deputies had nowhere to hide but trees. There was no cover other than their vehicles and a tree. And any of you that are listening to me know an AK-47 is going through an engine block, it's going through a car, and it's going through your bulletproof vest. So I'll take any questions that you may think I didn't cover in this.
First, the injuries. Tell us the scope of the injuries.
Thankfully, no deputy was injured. The 14-year-old was shot multiple times, and she's fighting for her life right now in the hospital.
And the 12-year-old, no?
12-year-old, other than his diabetic issue and dropping the AK-47, he's going to, be alive for a long time.
Do they think it's a big video game? Sounds like a video game.
I learned this a long time ago, that the sanctity of human life, and human life is cheap on the streets. And here's an indication of the 14-year-old and the 12-year-old have it so bad in life that they're going to defy law enforcement and engage them in a gun battle. And the more we de-escalated, the more we were trying to get, the armored vehicles out here and pepper spray and tear gas, the more embrazen they got, that they just felt that they continue to open fire. So much so that they came out and threatened to kill my sergeant and then took on our crime suppression team. And unfortunately, she lost. I have no sympathy, none. And anybody out there that says I'm an asshole, so be it. So be it. Tonight, had any of those deputies entered that property, I'd be going to their home, explaining to their husband or wife why they weren't coming home tonight.
Do you know what hospital did that?
I think she's at CFR.
Do you know, I know she shot multiple times. Do you know where?
She shot twice, once in the chest, once in the abdomen, once in the arm. And again, I want to also, this went on for hours. This wasn't a split second, we exchanged gunfire. We were out here from 7:30 till almost 9 o'clock before we returned fire. We took fire that whole time. And when people say, what do you need 2 Bearcats for? Here's a reason why I wanted one. Because I need one on the east side of the county and one on the west side of the county for incidents like this that occur. So, go ahead.
Do you know the nature of their criminal history? I know you mentioned
The 14-year-old was arrested for stealing dogs, for larceny. She then got teen court and was sentenced to a halfway house in Flagler. She burned that halfway house down on April 10th of 2021. And the Department of Juvenile Justice, well, what are we going to do with her? They decide to send her to what's called Fumps, Friends United Methodist Home, okay? It's not that far from here. We've been there 289 times last year. That an employee was punched in the face and killed not too long ago. They can't handle, they're not equipped to handle these kids. They send them to these homes, this home here, they walk away, and they break into cars, they commit robberies, and tonight, they tried to take the lives of 8 of my deputies at least.
How about the 12-year-old?
12-year-old had no other charges. He was sent to that home for whatever. He got in the company of the 14-year-old, and they decided that they were just going to walk off campus tonight. We really need to be exposing the Department of Juvenile Justice. It's a failure, it's a fraud, it's a fake, And when you hear about this restorative justice for juveniles, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. Because when you mollycoddle some kids like this, and they get their hands on more ammunition than some of my deputies had showing up here, it tells you how screwed up the system is.
Do these kids know who these people are? Or this
Have
is
no
like
idea.
their house?
They were out on the bike path and decided this was the home they were going to break into. The homeowner had just left 15 minutes prior, and they got in there. That house, this poor guy, when he comes home with his family, they trashed his house. Deputies were watching as the 14-year-old with a baseball bat was shattering furniture, shattering toilets, shattering the tub, and we were standing by surrounding it because we didn't want to go in. Because if we would have went in and confronted them, everybody would be screaming, de-escalate, the cops are bad guys.
When it comes to constraint and restraining, it does appear from the evidence you laid out that your deputies could have fired their weapons a lot sooner than you talked about.
My deputies showed more restraint than I'm showing right now. More because I am furious that we could be burying somebody tonight. They took multiple rounds. FDLE is in there now. They're going to conduct the investigation. We can tell you how many, don't tell you exactly, but I was in there. And I know for a fact, one banana clip was empty from that AK-47. I know from the radio transmissions that a 12-year-old opened fire on us. I know that the 14-year-old opened fire on us with a shotgun and then walked out and threatened one of my sergeants and told him that she was going to kill him. And we didn't return fire. But after she came out of the garage, hey, there was nothing left that we could do. We had to do what we had to do.
To have almost 300 calls to there by June, that means almost twice a day. What do you think your conversation will be like next when you have a conversation with the leadership of that facility?
We've had conversations with them. We've had conversations with DJJ. We've had conversations with every juvenile justice thing you can imagine because it's out of control. And you know what they all say? There's nothing we can do. It's the way the state is set up. Well, the way the state is set up, what happened in Miami? What do you got? A bunch of juvenile shooters shoot 20 people, it looks like, and kill 2. All right, you got this going on tonight. Somewhere along the line, the brainiacs in Tallahassee that want to do this restorative justice stuff, they need to take a deep look and say, something's not right here, because where the rubber meets the road, these kids are killers. They're capable of killing. This juvenile citation bullshit that you hear from these faith groups, they need to worry about what's going on at their pulpit and their church, not worry about what's going on in the goddamn streets, where you have 14-year-olds and 12-year-olds arming themselves. And where do you learn to use this weaponry? At 12, I didn't know how to fire an AK-47 or unload it and reload it or use a pump shotgun, but they know how to do it now.
In those hours that I guess you guys were trying to negotiate with them, did they say anything back? Did they pick up the phone and call? Was there any kind of contact or conversation with them?
Their conversation was they were going to kill my sergeant. They were coming out to kill cops. They were coming out to kill deputies. That's the conversation.
I know this is obviously a nonsensical situation for kids to be doing this, but did they say why, or did they?
We don't know. We don't know that yet. Hopefully we'll get to talk to the 12-year-old. Who knows? He's shrouded in rights. You don't have to say anything to us. The bottom line is, I could not be prouder of the way my deputies acted. They went above and beyond for what they did, and also, I know tonight I'll drop down on my hands and knees and pray that I'm not going to somebody's home, one of my deputies' homes, and telling them that they were killed in the line of duty and killed by a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. This is unbelievable. When we released the audio of this wasn't a shootout in one area of the house. They were traversing the length of that house and opening fire on deputies from different angles. This wasn't like they were stuck in one area. They were out on the pool deck. They shot through the bedroom window. They shot from the garage door. This is like Bonnie and Clyde, a 12 or 14 years of age.
Do you think with this body camera video, people will see, when they see firsthand, to see this 14-year-old, a caliber of violence that maybe people think is hard to comprehend for that age at this point tonight?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because I think we're at a stage in society where people don't believe what their eyes tell them. People don't believe what their eyes tell them. You'll have people out there that'll think little Johnny, if he got his head patted on a little more, this wouldn't happen. Or if Janie, somebody hugged her and kissed her, this wouldn't have happened. They don't want to understand there's evil in the world. And I can't explain why a 12 or 14-year-old are evil. All I know is, I know every single man and woman that was out here tonight, and I know of their families, and I know what kind of individuals they are, and they risk their lives to try to do everything they could to have them peaceably surrender, including stepping out in the gunfire to throw in cell phones and negotiate with them. They put their own lives on the line not to have it end up the way it did. And I can't imagine what's going through their faces or their hearts tonight if they had to shoot a 14-year-old. I can look at the supervisors' faces and I know how uncomfortable it is, but I try to reinforce the fact that you have a duty and obligation to go home to your family. You didn't create this mess. We have to work in it.
Mike, where do we go here with charges?
You know, he's 12, so whatever you charge him with, he ain't gonna stick for a long time. She's 14, she's fighting for her life. You know, we'll see what happens there. Nobody wants to see a 14-year-old die, and I'm certainly not espousing that. You know, I hope that she pulls through, and we'll worry about that at another point in time. My number one concern is for my deputies, their physical and their mental well-being. This was not an easy call. I listened to this from the whole ride over from my house when it first started, and you could hear it in their voices. They tried to do everything humanly possible to end this peaceably. But you know what? You can't end it peaceably if the people that are armed shooting at you don't want it to end peaceably. And where you can get so much hate in your soul, I don't know. I don't know where we're headed.
What do you tell the legislature?
Wake up. Wake up. Maybe you need to get out of Tallahassee and come out and start riding with law enforcement a little bit more. Instead of going up there and going out for cocktails at night, my challenge is come out and start riding with the deputies. Come out and start seeing what's going on with your juvenile rehabilitative program. One of the things they love to tell you is, oh, we cut down 50% secure custody. We don't have these kids in secure custody. You know why? Because you're sending them to an incompetent group at FUMPS that allows them to just walk all over the county and do what they want to do. And tonight, we see it again. There was no up in arms about the guy that was killed out there. None. Nobody said, oh, the guy was killed. Oh, you know, maybe you shouldn't have did this. Now, we're opening fire on deputies. What are we going to do here? You can only do so much.
Sheriff Chitwood, where are these kids' parents? You know?
They're in foster care.
Okay.
You know, that's the other thing. You can't raise your kids. Well, you don't want me raising them because you're not going to like the way it turns out.
Thank you, Sheriff.
All right?
Awesome.
Thank you,
Thank
guys
you, Mike.
and girls.